Welcome back to Living on Purpose, a journey to vibrant living. And we're so excited to have you here again today as we empower you and teach you so that you can understand what your body's doing, what it needs, that it helps you live a happier, healthier, better life. We are going to talk about putting all of these things together. So I'm Dr. Allison Brumley, and I am here with Karen Cox.
Yes, Allison, I'm excited to have this conversation today because I think it's going to help us as women know why we're uniquely different and why these three key hormone systems working in sync together is vital for our health and well-being. So in our previous episodes, we've talked about the adrenal gland and the thyroid gland and the menstrual cycle. And today we're going to see if we can put it all together and teach how they work in syncly together.
I think the biggest thing that comes up with having them work together is really when you are working on fertility. It can happen, all of those key hormonal systems are so beneficial for a regular pleasant cycle, without all the unpleasant premenstrual symptoms and things like that. But really prepping your body, it just makes women's bodies so unique and just designed to function so incredibly. And I know that sometimes it's a little derogatory about, why do we have these periods, and especially when they're miserable. But if you understand how each one supports the other, and then you get some feedback even from one to the other, it not only empowers you, helps you with that information, and then is able to have you follow what is going to help support those systems so much.
Women are designed to create life. Whether we're actively seeking to create life or not, we're designed to create it. So that means we have these sensors all the time assessing stress, to know if it's going to be safe to bring forth a life, or to even protect the lives we already have around us nurturing, or even our own life. Like, we have a unique sense to navigate stress around us for that reason. And so maybe we'll start there. Let's start with the adrenals and the thyroid and that stress response and how that can actually disrupt our cycle.
The way they work together is that if your body is under chronic stress, you just have too much stress day after day after day, you're not sleeping enough, you're not eating enough, or you're eating the wrong types of foods, more of those processed foods that don't have much nutrition in them at all, then the first thing that really goes awry is that adrenal system. And if it takes too much energy to run the adrenal system, if your body's trying so hard to make cortisol and DHEA and aldosterone, then you take energy away from the thyroid. And then the thyroid can't make enough thyroid hormone. So that was the T4. And the T4 then gets converted into T3. And if you have low levels of that, you don't ovulate well. You need T3 as the metabolism master key of everything to ovulate.
So that makes me think, and maybe this is me theorizing a little bit, but in times of famine or times of war, women didn't ovulate.
Right.
Because they didn't have the nutrition, or the stress response took in, so they stopped that. I'm wondering if today, where our nutrition, especially here in the United States, is so depleted, and we have so many processed fast foods, we're not getting the proper nutrition, that possibly our bodies might think that they're starving or in a state of famine.
Yeah. And I do. You're theorizing with that, but there are absolutely research papers that show, and thinking more about our day, when you've got the athletes, female athletes, when they are so lean and so active, they don't have a period. You have to have a certain amount of fat on you and a certain amount of caloric intake to be able to have that cycle functioning well. It takes quite a bit of energy and it's quite stressful. Women typically have more chronic disease because of those fluctuating hormones and the stress that it causes.
Yeah, and our bodies are designed to ovulate. That's when you know that a woman is in peak health, is because she's ovulating. And so if she's skipping and not ovulating, it's a telltale sign that she's not healthy.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is absolutely one of those warning signs. What's going wrong? Yeah, is she not ovulating? Does she not have enough thyroid hormone to ovulate? Does her body feel starved, or any of those numerous stress causes? What is causing it? So if you can figure that out, you can fix it.
Right, which is like we're asking women to track not only their menstrual cycles, but track their symptoms. Mm-hmm. So if they're having that wired but tired feeling at night, or chronically fatigued and stressed, it's a sign that their body's not getting nutrition to make all those hormonal cycles fire.
Yeah. And depending on where you live, you may or may not have access to really good food. And by that, I'm talking about, do they grow it in regenerative farming and organics and things like that versus just the big conventional, spray all the pesticides and antifungals on them too. In some areas, it can be more challenging to eat well than in other areas.
So if it is challenging, what are some of the main things to concentrate on? If you were, I have these resources available and I've got to create some meals for myself and my family, what are some of the most important things to look to get into the diet?
The bulk of the toxins that, whether, if you're eating animal protein, for instance, the bulk of the toxins in the animal will be in the fat. So, and that goes with eggs, it goes with dairy, as well as the meats, that if they are exposed, they're eating grasses that have some pesticide residue on them, or they're eating the genetically modified grain and soy, with corn and things like that, which is the bulk of their diet, to bulk them up and make them fatty, but it's pretty much a toxic fat. So anything you can do to, avoid that, not eating the fattiest cuts of meat if you don't have access to the free range type of meat, and same with dairy and eggs. Those are probably the most important. And I love the resource of the Environmental Working Group. EWG.org gives you consumer guides of what fruits and vegetables have the highest pesticide residue on them. They call that the dirty dozen. And then they have the clean 15, which has the least amount of pesticide on them. So then, if you're following that, you can do pretty well. And I also think that it's important to utilize things that these days are so easy to get through shipping. You can order from multiple different companies that have better cuts of meat, more organic, less processed foods, that, there are companies that travel and ship all over the country here. So, and then if you have the opportunity to grow your own garden or have your own chickens, and then what the chickens are eating, you want them to eat as much off the land as possible if they're eating insects, and there are wonderful ways to feed chickens and then get really good, healthy eggs.
And really, for our listeners that are just able to shop a local grocery store, shopping the outskirts of the store and avoiding the processed foods as much as possible. Mm-hmm. Really avoiding fast food restaurants as much as possible to find things to get more nutrients in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the worst ones, and I've mentioned these before, but sugar, any of your refined white sugar or refined white flour foods are going to be the worst. And then really with the fast foods, it's the trans fats If you're thinking about potato chips and French fries, combining the oils, those seed oils that they use with the potato is a recipe for disaster.
So embracing a new you and trying to wrap your head around these hormone systems and the importance, it's really just seeking the best way you can to get good nutrients in the body so it can make the proper parts, right?
Yeah. The best you can do with eating your whole foods, your fruits and vegetables, even if they aren't organic, wash them. The apples all have waxes on them that are not good for us. And, you can put them in a tub in the sink. You can put some vinegar in that, or they have little ozone generators that you can bubble ozone through your water that will help neutralize and remove the pesticides more than just running it under water. And those fruits and vegetables are the bulk of those micronutrients, our antioxidants, our vitamins, and our minerals that are so important for helping the body to function appropriately.
Right. So we want to get good nutrients in and to avoid stressors, which sometimes the toxic load of bad nutrients can be a big stressor on the body. Let's maybe now talk about sleep and what sleep actually does for these hormone systems in repair and recovery mode.
Yeah, the sleep is crucial. The reports that we have now and the research that researchers are doing on sleep is that these days we get about 20% less sleep than we used to even 50 years ago.
Oh, wow.
We're just go, 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 go. You think you're fine to run on 6 or 7 hours of sleep. Men can do that easier than women. Women, it takes more. We have more complicated parts, with the whole menstrual stuff is what really makes it so complicated. So if everybody in general is getting 20% less sleep than they should be, that too is just a recipe for disaster. And really, so sleep is your time for repair and recovery. And you look at the Chinese medicine clock, it's when the liver's the most active for detoxification. And it's just very, very interesting how it all works together. But if you don't sleep enough and you don't get enough repair and recovery, the body feels stressed. And then you go through that whole axis again of the adrenals not working well to support the thyroid. And then the thyroid can't support the progesterone.
So that's really interesting because, the liver is one of the biggest organ in the body for detoxification and to filter out the toxins, which we all are exposed to. And if that's happening at night, you can really see why we need to make sure we get to bed.
Yeah. Get to bed early. In my Chinese medicine courses, we were taught that the hours before midnight count as double the hours after midnight for sleep. But you do have, two really personality types. You either have the early bird or the night owl. So it's not so bad to embrace that too. It's not like everybody has to wake up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning or, they can't get anything done and their bodies won't function. Some people have a little different pattern of that sleep-wake cycle. And if you are good around whether you have school or work or getting up with the kids or whatever it is, then sometimes you have to rework what would be your normal diurnal and circadian rhythm.
Right. It's just more or less making sure you get enough.
Making sure you get enough.
And if you have disruption at night, then maybe a nap in the day, making sure you get enough sleep. What are your go-to that help you wind down at night?
I like a bath or a shower. There's something about, and I think that's so good for people who have allergies, but a bath or a shower, if you have your routine of whether you're soaking in an Epsom salt bath for 20 minutes, or even just a quick shower, and then doing more activities like your meditation, your castor oil packs to support your liver, and reading, meditation, those kinds of things are all going to be more calming to help you get ready for a space of falling asleep. And if people don't fall asleep easily, there are a number of things, whether you're looking at, supplementation, sometimes a little melatonin will help people just drift off quicker. I think about zinc and 5-HTP. You have to be a little careful with 5-HTP if you're on an antidepressant, because they both work on the serotonin pathway.
Okay.
So somewhat careful with that. That might be worth, talking to a physician about. But for the most part, I don't think you're taking enough that it would ever be an issue. But so sometimes those can be really helpful. Very oftentimes, if you wake up in the middle of the night, it can either be a blood sugar issue, that your blood sugar drops too low, and you don't necessarily have to feel hungry to have that wake you up.
Okay.
Or going to the bathroom. Sometimes if you have to wake up to go to the bathroom, that can be a low blood sugar sign.
Oh, okay.
So then that takes us back to cortisol. What's cortisol doing? That it can't go to the liver, break down the glycogen, and provide some glucose in the bloodstream so you're not hypoglycemic. So, getting that solid 8 hours. Women really should have 8 to 12 hours. Some need a little more than others. But the majority of women I see, it's more like 6 to 7.
So to help with that unique need that we have to get a little bit more sleep, we probably need to be more mindful when it comes time to the unwinding time, because it's hard for us as women to turn our brains off. And so if we do more to start that process of unwinding, maybe not watch a really stressful TV show or movie before you go to bed, or something to help that process. I do like the idea of a warm bath before I go to bed. It seems like I do sleep better and deeper when I've had a warm bath before I go to bed.
It's just the whole idea about routines is so helpful because it lets your body know what it's expecting next. And so the routines of, I'll talk about that with infants as well. If your infant doesn't sleep well, have a good routine. If it's a bath, a massage, a story time, and bed, then they know what to expect. And even though we don't consciously think about things like that, it's prepping our body to settle down. And it can be different at different stages of life. When you're younger, you're in high school, you're in college, you're up late with friends, your body's young and so adaptable that maybe it's not as big of an issue then. And then when, if you have little kids, very oftentimes I'll see these moms who are tired. They put the kids to bed and now it's the only time they have for themselves. So they want to be on social media, or they do their scrolling then, or they're doing all their laundry and cleaning till midnight. And then they're up again at 6 or 7 with the kids. And so to a certain extent, it's not helpful. You're better off having dishes in the sink and dirty laundry that you can throw in the morning rather than staying up late to get those things done.
I like what you said, that our bodies like to know what's coming next. And isn't it true? We don't really like the mystery. That creates stress. And sometimes we're unknowingly creating our own stress by not having a set routine and following through with that. And it's hard sometimes to get in the habit of a set routine. I often work with people to say bookends, like what's your morning routine to get you up and get you going, and then what's a good night routine to kind of help you settle at night. And what those bookends are just really important for that reason. You know what's coming next.
Yeah, I think of that specifically with the cortisol. And I think I mentioned when we were talking about adrenals, that cortisol awakening response. Right now, there's a new thing called 30-30-30. And I like it. within the first 30 minutes of being awake, you eat 30 grams of protein and you exercise for 30 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So this 30, 30, 30. And it might not work for everybody. You know, 30 grams is a lot of protein. You pretty much have to either, use some protein, a protein shake to help contribute to that, or you're making a wonderful breakfast, with lots of protein. And so if your body doesn't like to eat that early, it still can be nice to try and re-regulate that. But, there's a lot of people doing the intermittent fasting now, and some bodies thrive on that. That if they don't eat till 11 or 12, that they feel their best. So I do say kind of, that's what I love about that personal awareness. Whether you're journaling or just thinking about what does my body need? Because not everybody is able to wake up and eat first thing in the morning. And then if you're taking things on an empty stomach, like you have to take a thyroid medication 30 to 60 minutes before you eat something, or if there's something else, that it can be difficult to do that. But if your body can thrive on that, it's amazing.
And that's why, back to the topic of the unique makeup of women and our innate ability to pick up on the stressors around us, we are more prone to anxiety because we get anxious when we are feeling so stressed and anxious about the world in which we live in. What are some of your ways that you have found to help women with overgrown stress or anxiety, stress out of control?
Right. Oftentimes I'll look physiologically, I'll run some labs to see if there's any reason. There are, particularly if women have high copper levels, and you can get high copper levels when you're doing oral birth control, sometimes even with an IUD, but estrogen, higher levels of estrogen can increase copper. And copper and zinc have this inverse relationship of using some of the same proteins that will help it move around the body. But if copper is significantly higher than zinc and zinc is low, then copper doesn't have that buffer of the zinc, and it's very neuroexcitatory. So it's like anxiety, insomnia. That too will cause a postpartum depression anxiety, those high copper levels. So, we talk a lot about zinc. Zinc is so important for so many metabolic functions. And I'll see people take zinc without taking into account copper levels at all. Mm-hmm. So if you can get your doctor to order just a serum copper, serum zinc, ceruloplasmin with it can be helpful because that's the protein that binds copper. But if copper is over 110, it's too high. Or if it's just really high relative to the zinc. And so most of our foods have zinc and copper together. That's how important they are. And like your legumes, all your beans have zinc and copper in good ratios that you can just eat that to get those nutrients in and hopefully not create an imbalance. But I also think it's the routine puts you in that space of, being able to fall asleep, stay asleep. And one of the newer ideas, we talked about it back in, naturopathic medical school about mouth taping, that if you put the tape over the mouth and making sure you're breathing through the nose, you can sleep better. Sleep apnea is such a thing now, and it never used to be. Like, what's going on with sleep apnea? But if you have lots of allergies and lots of nasal congestion, that can be really hard. But you can change the way you breathe at night by doing the mouth taping.
That's really interesting because breathing through the nose creates nitric oxide in the brain, which is calming. And so to help calm the anxiety, calm the body, that's really interesting, that breathing through the nose. And sometimes we have to learn that. We're not natural nose breathers.
No. And that the mouth taping can be helpful for that.
So maybe now let's turn. We've talked a lot about the adrenal glands and the stress response. Let's talk about the thyroid and its role in irregular cycles. If we have women that have been tracking and their cycle is pretty irregular, let's maybe address that a little bit.
Okay, so the thyroid hormones, T3 particularly being that active thyroid hormone that lands on the receptor, there needs to be enough of that it can then trigger the metabolism of the ovary to release an egg. And after the egg leaves, in the ovary, you're left behind with a cluster of cells called the corpus luteum, and that's just a progesterone-making factory. So if you don't have enough thyroid, you don't ovulate, you don't make progesterone, and then you skip a period. And you can still have a period even if you don't ovulate. It's just way more common to, if you don't ovulate, you don't have a period. And so thyroid hormone is crucial, and hypothyroid extremely common. So whether it's that the adrenals are using up all the energy and the thyroid doesn't have the energy to make thyroid hormones, or the Hashimoto's. Now Hashimoto's was that autoimmune hypothyroid condition, very, very common. And that's another one I test on everybody, is do they have Hashimoto's? Because many people just think they're hypothyroid and they don't know it's autoimmune. And I treat them differently, even though both of them mean that you don't make enough thyroid hormone. But if you are, nourishing the thyroid gland with those foods containing selenium and iodine and tyrosine and copper and zinc, if the thyroid's functioning, you don't have autoimmunity, that might be just the pick-me-up it needs. So sometimes stress, sometimes nutrition, sometimes autoimmunity, then you won't ovulate and create a lot of this anti-inflammatory, calming progesterone.
The body is so smart.
It's so smart.
So smart. As a woman, we need tons of energy to be able to ovulate. And ovulate is such a big process of our overall health and well-being. So paying attention to our energy levels is really, really important. And especially as we talked about before, how do you feel after you exercise? Do you feel energized or do you feel depleted? And really paying attention to that.
Yeah, that can give you a huge clue into what's going on. And then the irregular cycles, that can be a huge clue of not ovulating and what do you need to ovulate. Ovulation and progesterone is such a big deal. When women are not making enough progesterone, they're considered estrogen dominant, and that puts you at a greater risk of those hormone-sensitive cancers as you get older. So maybe you even from your menarche, when you start your menstruation, let's just say at 14, which I wish everybody waited until they were 14. But from there, you start that and you have the PCOS, or you have, some of these other hormone conditions, endometriosis, you are estrogen dominant. You don't have that anti-inflammatory progesterone, that breast protective progesterone, that progesterone that helps you sleep. When I do hormone replacement on women, whether they're trying to get pregnant or we just can't get them to make enough progesterone on their own, or as you go into menopause, that's the first hormone that you lose is progesterone, you can take a bioidentical hormone replacement of progesterone at bedtime, and it helps with sleep tremendously. It's one of the biggest symptoms of menopause is the insomnia.
It is so true. So do you see a tie between PCOS and thyroid?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we know with the PCOS, not only do you have a difficult time ovulating and then you make less progesterone most typically, but that because those tissues have a resistance to the progesterone, it's almost like you need more. And with PCOS, there's also a resistance at the receptor site for thyroid and for insulin. Insulin's really what drives PCOS, the dysfunction in the ovary. And so if you can get all of those, I think it takes, quite a bit of detoxification and sleeping your 8 to 12 hours and having good nutrition, then you're way more likely to help your symptoms of PCOS, to have those regular cycles. The resistance part of that, I don't know that anybody really knows. The Environmental Working Group, who I've mentioned before, they did a study 20 years ago by drawing some blood out of umbilical cords of 10 babies who had just been born. So they draw out this fresh blood from these brand new babies, and they test them for chemicals, and they have over 200 chemicals in it. And this is back in 2005. So it's even worse now. We're almost to 2025. It's worse now than it was then. And we're toxic before we're born. So my big question is, does the toxicity malform the receptor? Or does it just land on the receptor so that nothing else can? But the detoxification of all the whether it's pesticides, herbicides, plastics, birth control, all those things, even some sorts of medications I'll consider toxic that you have to detox from to create a scenario where you're not so resistant to all those hormones.
We have to be so mindful of so many things around us, but it pays when we're mindful and we pay attention. I want to, before we wrap up this episode, talk a little bit about blood sugar and why blood sugar and eating, we just can't afford to eat so much sugar as women. And can you tell us why we really can't afford it? Our hips can't afford it, and what else?
Right. I do want to kind of stick with the PCOS right now because it really is the ultimate of the blood sugar issue, where it's an insulin resistance that drives the whole thing. It's just a great example of what happens when we eat too much sugar or we don't have good blood sugar control. So the majority of young women with PCOS are hypoglycemic. Their blood sugars are too low, and then over time, they get more of that hyper, where they're in the prediabetes range. If they keep going, they're in the diabetes range. And so if you have that insulin resistance, you don't ovulate. Having very stable blood sugar saves the stress on your adrenal gland. If you're hungry, your adrenal gland is working harder to make more cortisol to bring up the glucose. And if you're too low, you won't ovulate. If you're too high, you won't ovulate. So in a lot of fertility, and even some of the fertility I do, metformin is typically the drug of choice for inducing ovulation by helping with the insulin resistance. So, the best thing you can do is eat a regular breakfast, lunch, dinner. Try not to snack too much. If you're hungry in the afternoon, for sure, take a little snack, which would be more like, a celery and nut butter, not
the Snickers bar.
Not a Snickers bar. But doing, or hummus and veggies or something like that. Or if you need a nighttime snack so that you're not hypoglycemic in the middle of the night. Sometimes just a handful of nuts. I usually use that. I also know some people will do a little teaspoon of honey. And so something before bed once in a while. But the more you can stick to that regular schedule of breakfast, lunch, dinner, the less likely you are to cause the stress of insulin resistance and hypoglycemia on the system.
I love that. I think we've had some really great takeaways on this episode. One, we as women are really unique, and we We are designed to create life, and that in itself makes us unique creatures. And so we need to be pretty aware of our surroundings, our stress loads, getting really good sleep and good nutrition, watching fast food,
All of those things.
sugar, all of those things we as women really need to be vigilant about. Because if we're vigilant, we're going to be helping our families be better at that as well.
Well, and I will tell people you can't supplement your way out of a poor lifestyle. The lifestyle is foundational. That's getting enough sleep, eating nutritious food, and moving your body. So if you can do that, then sometimes and still need a little extra supplementation with that, it's fine. You take chaste tree berry. It will help you ovulate better if that's the issue. In PCOS, it's kind of interesting because you can have half of the women have acne, the other half don't. Half of them struggle with weight, the other half don't. Half of them struggle with infertility, the other half don't. So it really is just all over the board, but knowing that the blood sugar and the insulin resistance drives the majority of that. And I guess I bring that up because I make the assumption that every woman, for sure every young woman who walks through the door at my office, I assume she has PCOS until I prove otherwise. And
which is
it's
really
not otherwise very often.
Yeah. Which really maybe that she has a hormone imbalance somewhere. And that's what you're looking for. That's what you're seeking. And really that's what PCOS is telling us, is that we have hormone imbalance and it's becoming pretty epidemic.
It is.
For women.
It is.
So it's something we need to pay attention to so that we can live the lives that we want to live.
Yeah. And then get that foundational lifestyle piece on board. Get an extra hour of sleep. That would be my charge for this episode, is get an extra hour of sleep.
Which we all could use.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We could all use that extra hour of sleep and de-stress our life in some way.
Well, it's just kind of this circular pattern. You eat poor, you feel poor, you sleep poor, you eat poor, you just don't want to make any food because you're so tired, because you're, so it can just snowball this unhealthy lifestyle versus sometimes it's just start somewhere. If it's too overwhelming to do everything, just start somewhere, and as you assess your life, where do you really need it first? Would it be more helpful to get that extra hour of sleep? Would it be more helpful to do some meal prep or really think about, the proteins, carbs, and fats you're eating along with the micronutrients from your fruits and vegetables? And then do you have more of that routine? Do that first.
Yeah. So maybe that's our challenge to you, is to start somewhere. Pick one area to help you as a woman meet your unique needs. And like and subscribe to this channel. We want to hear what you want to know more about, and we want to get to know you. And so be bold and be beautiful. Until next time.